I think the biggest mistakes are ask the users what they want in their apps, and the second, if you didn't make this mistake, usually people don't check how users use their apps. So you shouldn't ask them, you should see how they use it and what went wrong, because you don't always know how to implement everything right.
Yeah, I think building upon that, it's about actually identifying a user journey. Like first off, like I see especially a lot of devs get cracking on some code and hack away, which is still cool, right? Like getting to developing is a great thing. But what we really encourage is actually before you start coding, just get a pencil and paper, and just sketch out what you're trying to do. Like just take some time and do a bit of design. And if you don't have a designer, like if you're a developer and you're a right killer code, then go and find a brilliant designer and partner with them, because those apps that have had well thought out and structured design end up being leaps abound than some app that's actually not so well designed.
The challenge that I think we see more than anything is it's just underestimating how difficult it is to get your app promoted, distributed, to get your app seen. And building apps it's a hits business. It's like making records or writing books, or making movies. If you're a games developer, I quoted a figure of 1.4 million apps that are currently out there in the sort of major app stores today. Of those 1.4 million, I'd hazard a guess that at least 1 million of them are games. If you're a games developer, it's really easy to underestimate how hard it is to get yourself, to get your head above the parapet and be seen and be noticed. And falling into this trap of thinking you're going to be a success just because it's a great game, it just doesn't work that way. You've got to work out which partnerships you're going to structure, how you're going to drive distribution, how you're going to drive promotion, and really raise the profile.
I like the idea that you need a team of T's. So the idea that you have someone with a really deep skill set in a particular area, but they have kind of like arms or a broad sense that they can speak with other people. Because I think if you want to create a super team, then you need a team of people that are playing to their strengths. And you identify their strengths, they go and do it, but at the same time they're able to work with each other. And if you have those gaps, then like you kind of said, mitigate those gaps, find out what you can do. But the worst thing is if you can try to get someone who's really good at code to maybe do some design work and vice versa. Like just get identify their strengths, get them to play at it, and then if you've got a kind of like an A team, if you will, then I think you'll be really successful.
We call it generalists with a spike. So it's kind of this having a good general grounding in what you're looking at, but you've got to have a spike in something, and you've got to be a specialist in a certain area. And what we try and do is make sure that as we expand the teams out, we ensure that we cover all the spikes. Every time we look at bringing on a new team, we have to hire a new series of spikes to cover all those bases. The other thing, just candidly, is when you recognise you've made a hiring mistake, recognise it early and nip it in the bud. And it happens, right? You get people that have amazing interviews, and you think, God, this guy's going to change the team. It's going to be brilliant. We'll get him on board. We'll have no problems at all. And 3 months down the track, you're like, oh my God, what happened here? It's a disaster. Some people are great at interviews and not so good at doing jobs. I think it varies by app store for sure, but it also varies by what you're trying to achieve. So back to the point on distribution. You can make amazing app, pretty good, amazing. You can make very compelling app experiences on iPhone and all other platforms without having to touch the App Store. So I can show you after this how I can sideload an HTML5 app onto an iPhone that looks and feels just like a native app that hasn't touched the App Store. So there's ways and means of doing that now, where you can make great looking apps, distribute it via an NFC tag or a QR code, have a full install experience on the device, and an icon on the home screen that's branded without actually going anywhere near the App Store. So that's one route that you can go down. The other route that we're seeing some app stores go down, including conversations we've had with Microsoft, is creating what I would call hidden categories in the App Store. So the mechanism for actually deploying the app on the device might be through an app store. Because on things like Windows Phone, you can't sideload at all. You have to install it. And same on BlackBerry 10 and Playbook, you can't sideload those either. You have to install it from the store. But the store could have a whole The Microsoft Store, for example, has got 100,000 apps in it. You could have an extra 100,000 apps that you just can't search or you can't browse upon. But if somebody is standing outside that property and they tap that QR code knows where to go and find that app. It's just that your general punter, it would be a bit of a lousy experience if you're searching for stuff and you come across 100,000 property apps and the one game that you're looking for. It wouldn't be ideal.
If you're in game development, I would highly recommend checking out an organisation called Tiger, because they run a lot of talks with UK developers and publishers. I was at a talk recently with Mills from Us Too, talking about Whale Trail, and it's fascinating to see the impact of being featured, like on a store, has a really big impact. But the game, like I actually kind of feel sorry in one way for game publishers right now, because there's so much stuff out there and their business models are changing like every 6 months, which is nuts if you think about it, right? In any other industry. But I'd like to believe that if you create an amazing game that people love, and you help them talk to other people about their experience and about the game, then you can drive a lot of like word of mouth. And I'm not going to say the V word, but you can. That's really good. But I think ultimately just knowing the basics of marketing, of PR, of social media support, that kind of thing, I think it can do a world of wonders. Because the days of let me publish it and then just sit back and watch the money roll in have like long gone, right? There's not too many stories at the moment of indies like getting out there making millions of dollars and retiring and living on an island somewhere, and that might still happen, but yeah, I think if you kind of add that social element from teaching other people, but I'd go and speak to the game studios. There's a pretty good community in the UK, and the guys are really open about what works and what doesn't work. And if you haven't seen Mills's talk, it's really very brutally honest about what has worked and what hasn't. It's really good.
I can speak from my own experience that PR doesn't really work in terms that you will get a huge number of downloads, because there's a huge gap between reading the article and finding it in the app, finding the app in the App Store. But being featured in the App Store helps a lot. Cross promotion from your or other apps helps a lot, and also word of mouth is also really important, because people tend to be more and more social. So, and I mean, in online social, if some friends recommend you a cool app, it's a lot more likely that you will download it if compared to if you would just see it in some newspaper.
2 points. Maybe somewhat controversially, I think traditional PR for small companies doesn't work. I think the idea of committing to a contractual PR agency at $5,000 a month minimum spend, typically maybe $10,000 a month, and then promising to publish one article a week in some blog somewhere that might never get read by anyone that's in your target audience. I just don't think it works. There's so much noise out there. You stand more chance of your game being found in the App Store than you do of the article that they wrote that week and published in some spurious online publication being found. So I just don't think it works. So if you're thinking of spending $5,000 a month on PR, my advice is don't do it. Save the money. And instead, spend that $5,000 a month on getting yourself on flights to conferences where the people that control what gets featured in app stores are going to be. And sit next to them and tell them how amazing your game is. But the serious point there is get to know the people who control the featuring, because they're the people that choose what's featured. So get to know them personally.
Because if you ask the customers, you will get some and use statistics and do what majority of people want. You will get average apps.
Okay.
You don't want average apps.
I think it's going to be one of those debates that will be like around probably long after I leave this kind of planet, because it's always a developer nirvana to write once, deploy everywhere, like since I think the dawn of programming. But I think in this space, I do appreciate how tricky it is if you're a brand or whoever, right, a creator, and trying to get your application on as many platforms as possible. I think HTML or HTML5 is is an important technology and is supported, like I can say, it's supported on Microsoft platforms, and with Windows 8 it's an equal player alongside native apps as well. But I think for software makers it's about offering choice. And the ability to offer the best experience. I think if you take a view in either extreme, you're kind of like cutting yourself short. You should choose the best technology. You should choose the best development framework for your team, for the platform that your customers are using, and ultimately that is going to kind of evolve and get better.
And we have quite a strong perspective on it, because whenever it comes up, it's always a technology debate. And our view is actually it's not about the technology at all, it's back to business model and distribution. And make your decision about business model. Do you want to be a paid app? Do you want to do subscription billing? In which case, you really have to go through a store, because it's too much of a pain in the arse to do it any other way. And make your decision about distribution. Do you want people to find you in a store? And therefore take benefit of the fact that millions of people are searching the Apple App Store every day. If you want to take advantage of that distribution, you've got to be in the store. Simple as that. If you can afford not to be in the store, so if you're a big enough brand or have a customer segment who are loyal enough to find your app outside of the store, and FT is a great example. And they wrote to every single one of their subscribers with a physical letter that arrived in the post saying, please go to apps.ft.com to download your new app. And lots of people do. So if you have a brand where it can survive quite happily without App Store distribution, then don't do native. But if you want to be in a store and you want to take advantage of the traffic, the payment mechanisms, the billing architectures, etc., you've got to build it in native. You've got to, in some way, shape or form, build it in native technologies. Now, to Will's point, you can build it as a kind of HTML5 framework and then wrap it in PhoneGap or whatever. We find that doesn't work very well. You end up with a pretty substandard experience, because you end up with Android apps that have backbones like you'd expect to find them on an iPhone, when an Android device has a hardware backbone, so you didn't need it. And particularly in Windows Phone 7 being the most obvious example, if you tried to port an iPhone HTML5 app to a Windows Phone 7 device, it would stick out like a sore thumb. So our view is, if you want to be in the app stores, if you want to have an app experience, do native. If you can survive, or there are reasons why you don't want to be inside the app, maybe because of content guidelines or whatever, then do it in web technologies.
Yeah, but I think so just that point around Windows. With Windows 8, you can do HTML5, JavaScript, CSS, and then hook into the Windows runtime. So you can write your HTML5 application just as if you would a native application. But I think the point around one app looking weird on different devices, no one's going to win out on that. So if you are going to choose a web framework, then it doesn't allow you to not design for the different platforms where it makes sense, because then you'll just end up with a generic kind of bland experience across any platform. So there is still going to be that work.
We do, again, just to build on that, we do native apps and web apps across pretty much all platforms. But our native apps are obviously different by design across all platforms, but interestingly we found that building a single HTML5 app and trying to port that across different platforms just doesn't work. So our HTML5 iPhone app is pretty much a completely different code base to our HTML5 Android app, as a case example. So even in HTML5, build once, deploy everywhere just doesn't work.
Perhaps because W3C, the organization behind the HTML5, said when will it be a standard? 2023 or
sometime in the future.
Yeah.
That's perhaps it doesn't work like you write it once. And it will run on all devices somewhere in 2024.
And it is getting better, right? If you are just looking at a single platform, so we've been playing with HTML5 apps on iPad, and if you're just looking at a single target device, you can do some pretty cool stuff in HTML5, but don't expect your HTML5 iPad app to work on an Android tablet in exactly the same way.
I think if like it's always this classic kind of debate about web versus native, but if web coming to devices like phones, slate, tablets, whatever, the fact that web technology is coming to this point just means that more people can create, and that's a good thing. Like it's something that we should get behind. I hate seeing this kind of social divide between native developers and web developers. This is really like us weird, right? It's kind of like football teams, but I think it's going to be interesting to see how it evolves. But if it means more people creating, applications, then that's great. Get the design right. Like really focus on design and design the experience, and then start developing. But if you really, and design can just be from a simple, like I said before, paper and pencil, sketch it out, then start coding. If you design it right, then it can save you so much time later on.
Great. Hire the best people you can afford. Simple.
I would say be passionate about it.
Great words of advice. Gentlemen, thank you so much indeed for all your time today. I'm sure you'll agree, some fantastic advice there. Thank you very much.